Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal, a production channel here at YouTube, and welcome to another Friday review. And today I am reviewing Echoes from the Gutter, which is the debut full-length album from Venator, who are a heavy metal band based out of Linz, Upper Austria. And this was released through Dying Victims Productions on February 25th. Without further ado, let me get into my overall thoughts and a little bit of, even within to the review, the history or whatever, so just a brief backstory about, Venator, since you might not be that familiar with these guys. Let me get into my overall thoughts on this album right here, Echoes from the Gutter. So let's go right to it. Okay, so before I really get into any of my overall thoughts on Echoes from the Gutter, and of course that little brief, at least again, a brief backstory around Venator, it's time to, of course, to read the track listing here. Again, the track listing rundown, which is where I tell you folks what are the songs are on this album, how many songs were on this album, and what's the time length for this album. And since we have at least about 9 songs here, it all clocks in at the length of 46 minutes and 2 seconds. So, these 9 songs are beginning with Howl at the Rain, Seven Seal, Red and Black, Night Rider, Manic Man, Made of Light, The Rising, The Hex, and finally ending with Streets of Gold. And some of these are not covers. Again, Seven Seal is not, of course, the cover of the song from Ambush, which was off of, the album Desecrator. Night Rider is not a Dokken nor a White Wolf cover. And, of course, Streets of Gold is not a Diamond Head cover. So, there we go. So there it is, folks. There's your 9 songs for this album. Now, Venator. Again, these guys, again, are based out of Linz, Upper Austria, Austria. And they were formed all the way back in 2016, releasing their debut EP. Oh boy, several years later, in 2020, which was titled Paradiser. Then, of course, they followed up with a split with Angel Blade, that's very same year. And then, of course, last year they released their single for one of the songs that would be off of this album, that would be Night Rider. Then, of course, following it this year with one final single for this album, that being Manic Man. And so that pretty much leads us into their debut full-length album, Echoes from the Gutter. Now, what you need to know about Venator. I mean, if you can't tell by the artwork for the album and just from the overall look of the band, especially the band photo that you see on the Metal Archives here, and of course their logo, and of course they are on Dying Victims Productions, and of course they're from Europe, that should give you many indications that these guys are going to play more something closer to the new wave or traditional heavy metal. More, again, just a more old school style form of heavy metal. And so, since, of course, if you see the person who produced the album here, that being Axel, who is actually the member from the German new wave or traditional heavy metal band Stallion, then that should give you many indications of what these guys are about. And these guys do not disappoint in that category. They do not, because this album through and through is just straight up, no frills, just straight up, old school style heavy metal. Very much, again, from Axel's production, which he gives it that very classic, almost authentic, very production and mixing that would have sounded very much in line with the albums on, like, let's say, mostly the Scratch Records label, if we're going to go really obscure and sort of like the German metal, label stuff, more like the bands and everything. It really does sound like something that would have fit right in line with anyone on like Scratch Records or even Noise Records back in the day. One album that actually comes to mind would be Danger Zone by Sinner. and that would be production-wise. It really does. It has very much a straight-up German metal sound. Of course, them being from Austria, so each of these songs kind of have that kind of more sort of really sort of very German Euro kind of old school heavy metal feel to the album. But the thing is, it's done in a way that feels authentic in its own right, that where it doesn't come off like a band that, oh yeah, we have to sound 80s. No, I think that they make an album that sounds like it really could have been released in the 80s and sounds like a long lost album from the 80s in a way. And it's done in a way that sounds still very classic, very classy in its own right. And there's some just great stuff on this album. Again, everything just pops out in terms of the riffs and so on. I mean, just let's listen to songs like, for example, like Howl at the Rain, Seventh Seal, Night Rider, Manic Man, Made of Light, The Rising, and The Hex. Just listen to these songs, and they all elude every bit of what I've just said about Venator here, and in terms of just really sounding like more classy, authentic 80s Euro German metal. That it has that, and it's just everything great here, from the riffs to even at times to even slight intros that they do add in, at least here and there, some slight clean, very epic kind of intros and stuff before some of these songs, especially for a song like Seven Seal, which, I mean, is probably pretty much a 5-minute song in its own right, but because of the intro, it pushes the length of the song to at least about 6 minutes and 17 seconds. But as it does, it's easily one of my absolute favorite songs. It's a heavy song, and it really does sound like more like classic European German metal from the 1980s. That's where I think the production, everything, this really sounds... Again, it's a very similar situation, too, with a band like Vulture out of Germany, whose album, Ghastly Waves and Battered Graves, kind of has that same sort of aesthetic to it, production-wise, where it just makes every bit of the songs and the riffs and everything just really pop out and give them that more classic, authentic feel. And these songs, I think, deliver on that aspect. Everything about this is great, even from the vocals here, who I have to kind of say, as far as comparing this guy, I'm going to compare at least the vocal department here of Venator to a previous Austrian, more modern, or just, retro, traditional heavy metal band, that would be Roadwolf, who, he reminds me of the guy from the band Roadwolf, who, again, are from Austria, like I've stated, and that's what this kind of reminds me of at times, too, but less focus on the sort of almost kind of Saxon or based kind of hard rock heavy metal in a way. This one is more straight up, more galloping, more heavy pounding metal riffs than compared to Roadwolf, which they do have their metal songs and they are still metals. It's that there's more classic sort of hard rock kind of based, whereas Venator are more straight up, more straightforward heavy metal is what I'm kind of getting at. And everything on here alludes to a lot of that. Again, there is some catchy songs on here. For example, Manic Man, one that comes to mind, and Night Rider 2, and of course The Hex. Some of these really are kind of catchy and everything to them. And they do play around with some great hooks on these songs, and they all pop out. That's why I think songs are, for example, like Howl at the Rain, Seven Seal, Manic Man, Made of Light, The Hex, and The Rising are pretty much the songs that really kind of pop out the most at me of the songs here. At least of the 9 here, they are the ones that pop out and I think really make the album for me. And again, just because of the hooks that these songs allude and bleed and everything, and from even the guitar riffs and the solos, and of course the soaring vocals of hope I can spell pronounce his name right, Johannes Humer. I hope I pronounce his name correctly there, but again, his voice and everything, he makes a lot of these songs come to life. And again, just the overall performance and the attack of some of these songs and the compositions, they're all very, very well put together, and I think it's where I feel the album is a great debut album for these guys. I think that they show a lot of great promise. They can expand on this, and I'm looking forward to the future of Venator. So really, there's really nothing else left I can say about Echoes from the Gutter other than this is a very solid heavy metal debut album from guys who obviously love the style and everything, and I think that they can expand on this album from here. And again, as far as more, again, still the bands that want to really try and recapture the period of the 1980s, especially the underground heavy metal stuff, these guys I think are proven to be better stalwarts of that, and I think they show a lot of promise. So there we go. There it is, folks. There's my overall thoughts on Echoes from the Gutter from Venator, and my overall rating for the album, since I have it written down. I'm giving it a 9.81 out of 10. Because, again, I think it's a very solid album. And at times, because of the production and everything, because I love the production on this album, and I also just named some of my favorite songs off here, that being Howl at the Rain, Seven Seal, Manic Man, Made of Light, The Hex, and The Rising. Because of me naming these songs, and I love the production, I love the voice of Johannes Humer. I hope I again pronounce his last name correctly there. Just because of all those reasons and those factors, I definitely love the album. But again, not everything's a complete winner on here, but I'm not going to name out a whole lot of weak songs. But again, I think it's a very well put together album, and because of the reasons that I said that I think are really good, I could have bumped it to almost close to at least maybe a 10 out of 10. But I think for an album like this, I think a 9.81 is, I think, a very solid enough rating for this album, because it still hones down my overall thoughts of the album, since, again, I think it's a really good album from these guys. But at the same time, I probably could think they could do even better on the next album. But only time will tell when it comes to that. So, again, it's a very good album. If you've never heard of Venator or this album, again, it's probably on, of course, and I think it is, on the new wave for traditional heavy metal full albums on YouTube. You can find it there, and you probably can find your copies online, being which at least distribution store you tend to go to that's online. But if you have listened to this album, if you have any thoughts, whether it be they be positive or negative, you can leave them in the comments section below. So there it is. There's my overall thoughts on Echoes from the Gutter from Venator. And this is probably this is, wow, I'm kind of fucking up there, because I know what this is going to lead into, but this is pretty much my final album review in this place. Because at some point, when you see the next album review, it's going to be a much different room in a different location. So from here on out, see you all then. Later, everyone.